The copper pot bubbled with angry determination, matching my mood as I stirred the thick red sauce. Through the kitchen window, I could see them on the back patio. My husband, Elliot, and the woman wearing my cashmere sweater, the one I'd searched for all winter. They were laughing, his hand occasionally brushing against hers, completely unaware of my presence inside. My sweater hung loosely on her slender frame, the sleeves rolled up several times. The sight of her wearing it made my stomach turn. In the dining room, the table was set for 3. My finest china, crystal glasses, and the linen napkins we'd received as wedding gifts. The appetizer plates held carefully arranged arugula, each topped with what looked like fancy bruschetta, but concealed something else entirely. My lawyer had been thorough, the papers printed on the thinnest. Most edible rice paper available, the ink food grade and tasteless. I heard Elliot's laugh again, that full-bodied sound I once thought was reserved only for me. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the serving tray. "Dinner will be ready in 15, I called out, my voice steady and pleasant despite the storm raging inside me. "Perfect timing," Elliot replied, his arm now fully wrapped around her waist. Vanessa and I were just getting hungry. Vanessa. Even her name sounded expensive, like a luxury brand I couldn't afford. I smiled and nodded, retreating back into the kitchen where they couldn't see the tears welling in my eyes. I'd spent 14 years building a life with this man, and in one evening, it would all come crashing down, not because of what I'd discovered, but because of what I was about to do. I placed the appetizers on the serving tray, each one a legal paragraph disguised as a culinary delight. Divorce papers had never looked so appetizing. "Time to eat," I whispered to myself, picking up the tray and straightening my spine. The weight of 14 years lifted from my shoulders as I pushed open the patio door with my hip. The evening sun casting long shadows across what would be our final meal together. 6 months earlier, life had been predictable, if not perfect. Elliot and I had settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long-term marriage. We'd met in college. I was studying culinary arts while he pursued business administration. Our relationship had blossomed in the campus cafeteria where I worked part-time. He would come in during my shifts, claiming the food was better when I was cooking, though we both knew it was just prepackaged meals I reheated. After graduation, we married quickly. I put my culinary dreams on hold to support his fledgling career in finance. "Just until we're stable," he'd promised. "Then you can open that restaurant you've always wanted." 14 years later, I was still waiting for stable to arrive. Our modest starter home had been replaced by a McMansion in the suburbs that Elliot insisted we needed to maintain appearances for his clients. I'd converted one corner of our oversized kitchen into a testing space for recipes I hoped to someday serve in my own restaurant. Though Elliot had grown increasingly dismissive of what he called my expensive hobby. "You don't need to work, Olivia," he would say. "My salary covers everything. Besides, who would take care of the house?" The house. All 4,200 square feet of it, with rooms we never used and furniture too expensive to sit on. I'd become its caretaker rather than its resident, a glorified housekeeper in a place that never felt like home. The first sign something was wrong came when Elliot started working late. Not occasionally, but 3 or 4 nights a week. His texts grew shorter, more perfunctory. "Client dinner. Don't wait up." When he was home, he was distracted, his phone perpetually in hand, angled away from my line of sight. "Is everything okay?" I asked one night as we lay in bed, a foot of mattress between us. "Just stress," he mumbled. "The Henderson account is complicated." I nodded, pretending to believe him, ignoring the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume that clung to his collar. The business trips increased in frequency, weekend conferences, overnight client meetings in neighboring cities. I filled my suddenly empty days with cooking, testing recipe after recipe, perfecting techniques I'd learned from online, masterclasses purchased with money, squirreled away from the household budget. My friend? Mackenzie noticed the change before I was willing to admit it. "You look tired," she said over coffee one morning. "Everything okay with Elliot?" "He's busy," I replied automatically. "The firm's expanding." Mackenzie's eyebrow raised skeptically. That's what Jake said before I found out he was expanding with his secretary. I laughed it off, but her words lodged somewhere in my chest, a splinter of doubt I couldn't extract. That evening, I broke my unspoken rule and checked Elliot's credit card statement online. Restaurant charges in town on nights he was supposedly out of state. A hotel booking 15 minutes from our house. A jewelry purchase from Tiffany's that had never made its way to me. Still, I said nothing. Part of me didn't want confirmation of what I already suspected. The other part was calculating, planning, remembering the ironclad prenuptial agreement I'd signed without reading. Young and trusting and stupid. Then came the day I found a long, blonde hair on his suit jacket, hair distinctly different from my dark brown curls. That night I began documenting everything. Dates of suspicious absences, unexplained expenses, the gradual disappearance of items from my closet, a cashmere sweater here, a silk scarf there, things Elliot claimed I must have misplaced. You're always losing things. Liv, he'd say with that patronizing smile that had once seemed charming. Maybe you should make lists. So I did. I made lists of his lies, his unexplained absences, his gaslighting comments. I photographed the blonde hairs that continued to appear. I recorded the late-night phone calls he took in the garage, thinking I was asleep, and I called a lawyer, Georgia Winters, a college friend who'd gone to law school instead of culinary arts. You need leverage, Georgia told me over a secure line, using her personal phone rather than her office line. The prenup is tight, but there's always a way. I don't care about the money, I insisted. I just want out without him destroying me. Georgia's laugh was cold and knowing. Trust me, Olivia. In these situations, money is the weapon they use to keep you quiet and compliant. We need to disarm him. Following Georgia's advice, I began transferring small amounts from our joint account to a private one she helped me establish. I gathered documents, tax returns, property deeds, investment statements, making copies of everything. What are you looking for? Elliot asked one evening, catching me at his desk. My recipe notebook, I lied smoothly. I thought maybe I'd left it in here. He seemed satisfied with the explanation, his attention already back on his phone. I noticed he'd started changing his passcode weekly, but I'd long since figured out his pattern, our anniversary date with a sequential number added at the end. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 months into my covert investigation, I still hadn't confronted him. Georgia advised patience, building a case methodically. Emotion might feel good in the moment, she cautioned, but strategy wins wars. Then came the day I saw them together. I'd gone downtown to pick up specialty ingredients from the farmer's market, truffle oil and aged balsamic for a new recipe I was developing. As I exited the gourmet shop, I spotted them across the street. Elliot and a tall blonde woman emerging from an upscale boutique, shopping bags in hand. He was carrying her purchases, something he'd stopped doing for me years ago. I ducked behind a produce stand, watching as he placed the bags in the trunk of his car, our car, then opened the passenger door for her with a flourish. Before she got in, he pulled her close, kissing her with a passion I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The blonde woman was wearing my missing cashmere sweater. I followed them, using the rideshare app on my phone, maintaining a discreet distance. They drove to a luxury apartment building downtown, the kind with a doorman and valet parking. I watched as they entered together, Elliot's hand possessively at the small of her back. When I returned home, I called Georgia. I'm ready, I said. My voice calm despite the rage and hurt swirling inside me. Tell me what to do next. The plan Georgia devised was elegant in its simplicity. We would catch them together, but not in the dramatic confrontation scenes from movies. No, this would be calculated, controlled, and completely on my terms. Invite them to dinner, Georgia suggested. Both of them. Why would he agree to that? I asked. Because men like Elliot always think they're the smartest person in the room. Play into that. Make him believe you're clueless. And so I began the performance of my life. I became more accommodating, less questioning. I stopped checking his phone, stopped documenting his absences. Instead, I focused on cooking, experimenting with new recipes with a passion that seemed to both relieve and confuse him. You seem different, he commented one evening as I plated an elaborate coq. Vin. I've just been focusing on what makes me happy, I replied, the double meaning of my words lost on him. The final piece fell into place when Elliot mentioned a dinner party he wanted to host for potential clients. I can cook, I offered immediately. Something impressive. His surprise was evident. You want to? I was going to suggest catering. I placed my hand on his arm, feeling nothing but the expensive fabric of his shirt. Let me do this. You know my food is better than any catering company. Pride flickered across his face, not for me, but for what my talents could do for his image. If you're sure. I am, I assured him. In fact, I've been working on some special appetizers I think will really make an impression. The evening before the dinner, Elliot called to say he'd be working late again. I knew exactly where he'd be and with whom. The thought no longer hurt. It fueled me. Actually, I said, could you do me a favor? I need you to pick up some specialty ingredients for tomorrow's dinner. There's a shop downtown that stays open late. Can't you order delivery? He asked, impatience evident in his voice. They don't deliver these items, I lied. It's fine, I'll figure something else out. As expected, guilt made him acquiesce. Text me the address. I'll stop by. I sent him the address, the gourmet shop directly across from the blonde's apartment building. Then I waited. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Olivia. Elliot's voice had an unusual quality, nervousness poorly disguised as casual conversation. I ran into an old friend while picking up those ingredients. Vanessa Collins. She was at that firm charity gala last year, remember? I didn't. Anyway, he continued, she's new to town and doesn't know many people yet. I thought, since we're having that dinner party tomorrow, maybe we could include her. Good networking opportunity. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. That sounds perfect, I replied. I'll set an extra place. Great, he said, relief evident in his voice. She's actually helping me pick out the ingredients now. Any specific requests? Just tell her to dress nicely, I said. It's going to be a special evening. After hanging up, I called Georgia. They took the bait, I told her. Perfect, she replied. I'll have the papers ready tomorrow morning. Remember, rice paper for the appetizers. The ink is food grade, completely tasteless. And legal? I confirmed, completely. Signature by consumption is unusual but precedented. As long as we can prove they knowingly ate the documents, which the video recording will confirm, it stands up in court. I spent the next day preparing, not just the food, but the staging for what would be the performance of my life. Hidden cameras were installed in discreet locations around the dining room and kitchen. The divorce papers, printed on rice paper, arrived via courier at noon. I practiced my lines, my facial expressions, my timing. By 5 o'clock, everything was ready. I changed into a simple black dress, elegant but understated. The food was prepared, the table set, the appetizers arranged with the divorce documents hidden beneath layers of prosciutto and fig. At precisely 6:30, I heard Elliot's key in the lock. Something smells amazing, Elliot called as he entered, setting down his briefcase by the door as he always did. He stepped into the kitchen, leaning in to kiss my cheek, a performance for the woman behind him. This is Vanessa, he said, gesturing to the tall blonde standing awkwardly in our entryway. Vanessa, my wife Olivia. She was beautiful in that effortless way that probably required hours of maintenance. Sleek blonde hair, delicate features, impossibly long legs. And she was wearing my black cashmere sweater, the one Elliot had given me for our 10th anniversary. I recognized the small diamond pendant around her neck as well, also mine. A birthday gift from 3 years ago. Lovely to meet you, I said, extending my hand, noting how she shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. I've heard so little about you. Elliot laughed nervously. Olivia's got a great sense of humor. Clearly, Vanessa replied, her voice higher than I'd expected. She glanced around our kitchen, taking in the professional-grade appliances, the copper pots hanging from the ceiling rack. You have a beautiful home, thank you. Some parts of it have been missing recently, but I suppose they've been put to good use. I gestured vaguely toward her, my sweater, my necklace. Vanessa's hand instinctively went to the pendant. "Oh, this? Elliot gave it to me. It's a custom piece," I finished for her. The jeweler added those small diamonds along the chain because the center stone was flawed. A subtle imperfection you can only see in certain light. Confusion flickered across her face as she looked to Elliot, who had gone very still. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked, filling the uncomfortable silence. "I've opened a Bordeaux that pairs perfectly with the appetizers." "Sounds great," Elliot said too quickly, steering Vanessa toward the dining room. I noticed he kept his hand at the small of her back, the same gesture I'd witnessed outside her apartment building. I poured 3 glasses of wine and followed them, carrying the tray of appetizers. They were seated across from each other, with an empty chair between them intended for me. Instead, I placed the tray on the table and remained standing. "These look amazing," Vanessa said, eyeing the carefully arranged appetizers. "Did you make them yourself?" "I did," I replied. "It's a special recipe, very binding." "Olivia trained as a chef before we got married," Elliot explained, his voice taking on that proud, possessive tone he used when showcasing what he considered his achievements. "She's incredibly talented." "Not talented enough to open my own restaurant, according to some," I said lightly, watching his expression falter. "I never said that," he protested. "I just thought—" "Please," I interrupted, gesturing to the appetizers. "Try them while they're still warm." "I insist." Vanessa reached for one immediately, always the eager-to-please type, I imagined. Elliot hesitated, then selected one as well. I remained standing, wine glass in hand, watching as they took their first bites. "These are incredible," Vanessa murmured, reaching for a second. "What's in them?" Elliot asked, his suspicion finally catching up to his appetite. I smiled. "Oh, a little of this, a little of that. The secret ingredient is actually something you should read before consuming, but I suppose it's too late for that now." I reached beneath the serving tray and pulled out a folder, identical copies of the papers they were eating, but on regular paper. I placed it on the table between them. "What is this?" Elliot demanded, putting down his half-eaten appetizer. "Those delicious little bites you're enjoying? They're divorce papers, printed on rice paper with food-grade ink. Quite expensive, actually, but worth every penny for this moment." Vanessa choked slightly, reaching for her water glass. "I don't understand." "It's simple," I explained, maintaining my composure. "By consuming those documents, you've both acknowledged receipt. The cameras hidden around this room have recorded your consumption as legal acceptance." Elliot's face drained of color. "Cameras? What cameras?" I pointed to the decorative vase of flowers in the center of the table, the new artwork on the wall, the seemingly innocent salt and pepper shakers. "I've become quite tech-savvy recently. Another talent you underestimated." "This is insane," Elliot sputtered, standing up abruptly. "You can't possibly think this is legal." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway. "It is." Georgia stepped into the dining room, impeccable in her tailored suit, tablet in hand. "Signature by consumption. Unusual but precedented. The terms are quite generous considering the circumstances." "Who the hell are you?" Elliot demanded. "Georgia Winters, attorney at law," she replied calmly. "I've been working with Olivia for several months now. You'd be amazed what we've documented." Vanessa stood up, looking desperately between Elliot and the door. "I should go." "Before you do," I said, reaching into my pocket and removing a small velvet box, "you might want these back." I opened it to reveal the diamond earrings Elliot had given me for our 5th anniversary. They match the necklace. "The one you're wearing that belongs to me, along with that sweater." Vanessa's hand flew to her throat, then to the sweater she wore. "Elliot told me these were gifts." "New gifts?" "I'm sure he did," I replied, surprising myself with the genuine pity I felt for her. "He told me he'd lost his wedding ring at the gym 3 months ago. Funny how it's currently on your finger, just on a different hand." Elliot lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. "You vindictive bitch! You think you can humiliate me like this?" Georgia stepped smoothly between us. "I wouldn't do that, Mr. Harrington. Assault charges would really complicate the divorce proceedings." Not to mention the evidence we've gathered regarding your embezzlement from client accounts. His face went from red to white in an instant. What are you talking about? The mysterious deposits into your private account? The one you opened in the Caymans? I supplied. Georgia found those while we were building the case. Apparently your firm is very interested in that information. Vanessa backed away from him. Elliot, what is she talking about? You said you were getting a bonus. He was, I confirmed. Just not from his employers. Elliot's composure crumbled entirely. You had no right to access my private accounts. Actually, Georgia interjected, as his spouse, she had every legal right. And good thing she did, because now instead of you leaving her penniless with that prenup, we have leverage. Here's how this is going to work, I said, feeling a strange calm descend over me. You're going to sign these papers, the regular paper versions, and agree to my terms. In exchange, I won't send the evidence of your financial misconduct to your firm or the SEC. This is blackmail, he hissed. This is negotiation, Georgia corrected. And it's the best offer you're going to get. Vanessa was already gathering her purse, edging toward the door. I had no idea, Olivia. He told me you were separating already. That you knew about us. I'm sure he told you a lot of things, I replied, not unkindly. Just like he told me. The difference is, I stopped believing him. Elliot looked between us, trapped and desperate. Vanessa, don't leave. This is just Olivia being dramatic. We can fight this. Fight what, Elliot? She demanded. The fact that you gave me another woman's clothes? Her jewelry? That you apparently stole money? What exactly am I supposed to stand by you for? It's not what it looks like, he insisted. The most cliched line in the history of caught cheaters. It never is, I said softly. But we both know exactly what it is. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock Elliot had insisted we needed for the dining room, a status symbol more than a timepiece. I want to see these so-called financial records, Elliot finally said, his voice low and dangerous. You're bluffing. Georgia handed him her tablet. Page through at your leisure. Account numbers, transaction dates, offshore transfers. We have it all. As Elliot scrolled through the damning evidence, his face cycled through a range of emotions. Disbelief, rage, fear, and finally, defeat. He looked up at me with eyes I no longer recognized. Why go through all this elaborate setup? He asked. Why not just serve me papers like a normal person? Because you would have hidden the money, I replied simply. You would have found a way to manipulate the situation, to make me seem crazy or vindictive. I needed to catch you off guard with witnesses. I'm not a witness, Vanessa interjected quickly. I had no idea about any of this. I turned to her, really looking at her now, the fear in her eyes, the way she clutched my sweater around herself protectively. How long have you been seeing Elliot? She hesitated, glancing at him before answering. Almost a year. The revelation should have hurt more than it did, but I felt oddly detached, as if watching a movie about someone else's life. Did you know he was married? I pressed. He said it was over in everything but paper, she admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. That you stayed together for appearances, for his career, that you had separate rooms. I laughed, the sound brittle and unfamiliar even to my own ears. We redid our master bathroom last spring. Spent $40,000 on a custom shower and soaking tub because Elliot insisted we needed it. Does that sound like a couple living separate lives? Vanessa's expression crumpled. I'm sorry. I truly am. Don't apologize to her, Elliot snapped. She's manipulating you, just like she's trying to manipulate me. Olivia always plays the victim. That's rich coming from the man who told me my culinary school dreams were impractical while spending thousands on golf memberships and watches, I retorted, finally allowing some of the anger to seep into my voice. The man who told me having children would complicate things, then promised his mistress a family. Vanessa's head snapped up. You told her about that? He didn't have to, I said. I found the fertility clinic brochures in his briefcase. The ones with your appointments written in the margins. Elliot stepped toward me, his hands clenched into fists. You had no right to go through my things. No right? I echoed incredulously. I'm your wife. I supported you for 14 years. I put my dreams on hold for you. I looked the other way when you started coming home late, when you invented business trips, when you gaslit me about missing clothes and jewelry that were actually gifts for your mistress. I had every right. I gave you everything, he shouted, gesturing around at the house. A beautiful home, financial security, a life most women would kill for. You gave me a cage, I corrected him, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. A beautiful gilded cage where I could cook your meals and clean your house and warm your bed when you weren't too busy with her. You didn't give me a life, Elliot. You took mine. Vanessa had backed up against the wall, witnessing our unraveling with wide, horrified eyes. I should really go, she whispered. Stay, I told her firmly. You should hear this too. I turned back to Elliot, 14 years of suppressed truth rising to the surface. You convinced me I wasn't good enough to pursue my dreams, that my cooking was just a hobby, not a viable career. You made me feel guilty for wanting more than being your wife. And all the while you were building a separate life with her, making promises you had no intention of keeping to either of us. That's not true, he protested weakly. I supported you. No, you contained me, I countered. And when that wasn't enough, when I still had ambitions and desires that extended beyond these walls, you found someone else. Someone younger, someone more willing to worship you the way I used to before I realized what you really were. And what's that? He challenged, his voice dripping with contempt. A fraud, I said simply. A man so insecure in his own worth that he needs to control and diminish the women in his life to feel powerful. A man who steals from his clients because his lifestyle exceeds his abilities. A man who gives away his wife's possessions to his mistress because he's too lazy and unimaginative to find original gifts. Elliot lunged toward me, but Georgia was faster, stepping between us once more. That's enough, she said firmly. One more move like that and I call the police. He backed away, breathing heavily, his composure completely shattered. This isn't over, he threatened. Actually, it is, I replied, picking up the folder with the divorce papers. You have two choices. Sign these papers, which give me a fair settlement and my freedom, or I send evidence of your embezzlement to the SEC. Your firm and the police. You wouldn't, he challenged. I fed you divorce papers disguised as appetizers, I reminded him. I think we've established I'm not the pushover you thought I was. For a long moment, he stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Then, wordlessly, he snatched the pen Georgia offered and signed the papers with angry, jabbing motions. Vanessa, I said, turning to the woman still frozen against the wall. You can keep the sweater and the necklace. Consider them parting gifts. But I'd be careful about the promises he makes you. They tend to expire when they become inconvenient. She began, but couldn't seem to find the words to continue. He's all yours, I told her. Though I suspect he won't be quite the catch without his wife's income to subsidize his lifestyle and cover up his crimes. Elliot's head snapped up. What are you talking about? You don't have an income. I smiled, feeling genuinely pleased for the first time all evening. Actually, I do. Those recipes I've been wasting time on? They've been published in Gourmet Quarterly for the past 6 months under a pseudonym. And that cookbook deal you dismissed as a pipe dream? I signed the contract last week. His face registered shock, then confusion. But the joint account only received the minimum to keep up appearances, Georgia supplied. The rest has been going into her separate account. Perfectly legal, given the circumstances. You've been planning this for months, he realized, anger giving way to something like respect. I learned from the best, I replied. You always said I needed to be more strategic. Vanessa had edged toward the door, clearly eager to escape the unfolding drama. I really should go, I finished for her. But before you do, ask yourself if a man who could do this to his wife of 14 years is really someone you want to build a life with. She paused, hand on the doorknob, looking back at Elliot with new eyes. Without another word, she left, the door closing quietly behind her. Elliot stared after her, then turned back to me, defeat evident in every line of his body. What happens now? Now, I said, gathering up the signed papers and handing them to Georgia, you pack a bag and leave. The terms of the divorce give you 48 hours to remove your personal belongings from the house. And where am I supposed to go? He demanded. I hear Vanessa has a lovely apartment downtown, I suggested. Though I suspect she might be rethinking her living arrangements right about now. Georgia checked her watch. I'll file these first thing in the morning. Olivia, is there anything else you need from me tonight? I shook my head, suddenly exhausted but strangely exhilarated. No, thank you for everything. After Georgia left, Elliot and I stood in silence. 14 years of history collapsing into the space between us. You'll regret this, he said finally, but the threat sounded hollow. I regret a lot of things, I acknowledged. Wasting 14 years with someone who never valued me. Putting my dreams on hold for a future that was never going to happen. But this I will never regret. He looked around the dining room, at the half-eaten appetizers and abandoned wine glasses. You could have just asked for a divorce. You could have just been faithful, I countered. Or honest or kind. We all make choices, Elliot. These are the consequences of yours. Without another word, he turned and headed upstairs, presumably to pack. I remained in the dining room, listening to his footsteps above, the opening and closing of drawers, the sound of a life being dismantled. I didn't follow him. Instead, I poured myself another glass of wine and sat at the table, allowing myself to feel everything I'd suppressed during the confrontation: grief for the marriage I'd thought we had, anger at his betrayal, fear of the uncertain future ahead. But beneath it all, a growing sense of liberation, of possibility. 40 minutes later, he came downstairs with 2 suitcases. He paused in the dining room doorway, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, I did love you once, he said quietly. I know, I replied. Just not enough to be honest, not enough to be faithful, not enough to support my dreams the way I supported yours. He nodded, accepting the truth of my words. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. It's worth exactly nothing, I told him, meeting his gaze steadily. But thank you anyway. He lingered a moment longer, perhaps waiting for something. Forgiveness, absolution, a crack in my resolve. Finding none, he turned and walked to the front door. I listened to it open and close, followed by the sound of his car starting in the driveway, then silence. Beautiful, complete silence. The morning after Elliot left, I woke up in the middle of our king-sized bed, having slept diagonally across it simply because I could. Sunlight streamed through the windows. I'd removed the blackout curtains Elliot had insisted on the night before, along with several other immediate changes to reclaim the space as my own. My phone buzzed with a text from Georgia. Papers filed. You're officially in process. How are you feeling? I considered the question as I made my way downstairs to the kitchen. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, as if Elliot's departure had altered the very atmosphere. Or perhaps it was just my perception that had changed. Surprisingly okay, I texted back. What now? Now we wait. 60-90 days for everything to be finalized. In the meantime, live your life. My life. The concept seemed simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. For 14 years, my identity had been inextricably linked with Elliot's. Now I had the chance to rediscover who Olivia Harrington, soon to be Olivia Chen again, reclaiming my maiden name, really was. I made myself a simple breakfast of avocado toast and sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through my emails. There was one from my cookbook editor, confirming our meeting next week to discuss the final layout. Another from Gourmet Quarterly, requesting a new series of seasonal recipes for their winter issue. I'd kept these opportunities secret from Elliot, partly out of fear he would dismiss them, and partly to protect something that was solely mine in a marriage where everything else was defined by his needs and preferences. Now I could pursue them openly, enthusiastically. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. When I opened the door, I found Mackenzie standing there, arms laden with grocery bags. Georgia called me, she explained, brushing past me into the house. Said you might need company. I brought provisions. She headed straight for the kitchen, unpacking bottles of champagne, chocolate, fancy cheeses, and a stack of movies. I'm not sure if we're celebrating or commiserating, she admitted, arranging everything on the counter. So I brought supplies for both, I laughed, feeling a rush of gratitude for her friendship. Honestly, I think we're celebrating. Mackenzie popped the champagne, filling 2 flutes. To freedom, she toasted. To new beginnings, I added, clinking my glass against hers. We spent the day talking, drinking, and planning. Mackenzie, who had gone through her own divorce 3 years earlier, offered practical advice mixed with moral support. By evening, we had created a list of immediate steps for my new life. Consult. With a financial advisor to reorganize my finances finalize. The cookbook deal. Begin looking for commercial kitchen. Space for recipe testing. Consider selling the too large house for something that actually felt like home. Take that cooking course in Italy I'd always dreamed about. What about dating? Mackenzie asked as we started our second bottle of champagne. Any interest in getting back out there? I considered the question, surprising myself with my answer. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. I need to figure out who I am without Elliot first. I spent 14 years being defined by my marriage. I want to know who Olivia is on her own terms. Mackenzie nodded approvingly. That's healthy. And when you are ready, I know several eligible men who would kill for a partner who cooks like you do. Is that all I am? A good cook? I asked, the question more serious than my tone suggested. Of course not, she replied, immediately contrite. You're brilliant, kind, resilient as hell, evidenced by that divorce paper appetizer scheme, which, by the way, is absolutely legendary and will be told at girls' nights for generations to come. I laughed, but her words resonated. The elaborate plan to serve Elliot divorce papers had been more than just a dramatic gesture. It had been a reclamation of my power, a creative solution to a complex problem. The same skills that made me a good chef, attention to detail, ability to adapt, understanding of how different elements combine to create something greater than the sum of its parts, had helped me escape a marriage that had slowly been suffocating me. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I met with Georgia regularly to navigate the legal aspects of the divorce. Elliot had contested initially, but the threat of his financial misconduct being exposed quickly brought him back to the table. The final settlement was fair. I kept the house, which I planned to sell, my separate accounts, and my full culinary intellectual property rights. He kept his retirement accounts and his career, though Georgia informed me that his firm had begun an internal investigation based on anonymous tips about financial irregularities. Vanessa disappeared from the picture entirely. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she had moved back to her hometown shortly after our confrontation dinner. I felt no animosity toward her. She had been as much a victim of Elliot's manipulations as I had been, just in different ways. 3 months after that fateful dinner, my cookbook hit the shelves to critical acclaim. Home Kitchen Revolution, Reclaiming Your Culinary Power, was part cookbook, part memoir, chronicling my journey from abandoned culinary school dreams to published chef. I had decided, with Georgia's encouragement, to include a vague reference to my marriage and divorce in the introduction, not naming names or sharing sordid details, but acknowledging how reclaiming my passion for cooking had helped me reclaim my sense of self. The day the cookbook was released, I received a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the book. You deserve the success. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling nothing but a distant sadness for the years wasted and the person I had once loved. I didn't reply. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party at my new place, a modest but charming condo with a professionally outfitted kitchen that I had designed myself. Mackenzie was there, along with Georgia, my editor, and a few other friends who had supported me through the divorce and my culinary renaissance. As we gathered around the table, enjoying the dishes from my cookbook that I had prepared with love and pride, Georgia raised her glass. To Olivia, she toasted, who fed her husband divorce papers and turned lemons into a best-selling cookbook. Everyone laughed, clinking glasses and adding their own congratulations. I looked around at the faces of my friends, at the home I had created that truly reflected me, at the future stretching out before me, uncertain but full of possibility. "To ingredients," I countered, raising my own glass, "and knowing exactly when and how to use them." Later, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up the kitchen, now a meditative pleasure rather than an obligation, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Olivia Chen, the author of Home Kitchen Revolution?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, it is," I replied cautiously. "My name is Diane Reynolds. I'm a producer with the Food Network. We're developing a new show focusing on chefs with unique stories and exceptional talent. Your book caught our attention, and we'd love to discuss the possibility of you hosting a segment or potentially your own show." I leaned against the kitchen counter, stunned into momentary silence. "That's amazing," I finally managed. "I'd love to discuss it." After arranging a meeting for the following week, I hung up and looked around my kitchen, the space where I had rediscovered my passion, my purpose, myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, Elliot had dismissed my culinary ambitions as impractical dreams. Now those same dreams were opening doors I had once thought permanently closed. The cookbook, the potential TV show, the catering business I had started on the side, all were flourishing because I had finally found the courage to prioritize them, to prioritize myself. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Elliot was living his life, perhaps reflecting on what he had lost, perhaps already entrapped in new lies. It no longer mattered to me. The pain of his betrayal had faded, replaced by gratitude for the lessons it had taught me and the strength it had forced me to find. In the end, serving Elliot divorce papers disguised as appetizers hadn't just been about ending my marriage with poetic justice. It had been about reclaiming my story, transforming myself from a supporting character in someone else's narrative to the protagonist of my own. I smiled, remembering George's words from months ago. Emotion might feel good in the moment, but strategy wins wars. She had been right, of course. But what neither of us had anticipated was that winning this particular war would lead not just to freedom from a broken marriage, but to a whole new life I could never have imagined while trapped within it. I picked up my cookbook from the counter, running my fingers over the embossed cover with my name boldly displayed. Olivia Chen, chef and author. Not Olivia Harrington, Elliot's wife. Just me, finally, and completely myself. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying dish I had ever created.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.